I don't believe I was in my right senses when I left my amiable school sweetheart and our 2 daughters for this descendant of Jezebel I fell head over heels in love with. I cheated on my wife with her and married her after I divorced my wife. Divorcing my first wife was a huge mistake. Lizzie is graceful and classy, but was extremely hurt and devastated by our marriage ending in divorce because of this awful woman. I have 3 daughters from my first marriage. Katie worked at the airport and I was introduced to her by a friend. We hit it off immediately. She was a 24-year-old vivacious lady. Beautiful, charming, and flirty. She was energetic, and whenever she came around to my office I felt excited and young at heart. We started seeing each other more while I began to have shorter conversations with my family, and I began to give excuses whenever I wanted to be with Katie. I told her I had separated from my wife, and so the affair continued and we remained inseparable. By the time Lizzie discovered her husband had a second phone when he had a medical emergency and had to be rushed to the hospital, Katie was already pregnant and he was already planning to leave the marriage. Tony left his wife of 15 years for Katie. She never spoke anything negative about me. But I met my match in Katie. I absolutely made a mistake when I left Lizzie for this abomination and excuse of a woman. I should never have done it. I'm struggling with loneliness right now. I can't be with Katie anymore. I want my first wife back because life is hard without her, and I think it's going to be even harder. But she wouldn't even take me back either. She's still single. Not after all the disrespect. Now I realize what I threw away. They say, as you make your bed, so you must lie on it. Yes, I am suffering the consequences of my action. Oh boy! It is bad. Very bad. I could never have imagined in a million years this would happen to anyone I know. I've only seen this in movies. My story is a pathetic one, but I am lying on my bed exactly the way I made it.
Welcome to my channel. This story of everyday people like you and I who made avoidable mistakes in their marriage will make you realize that marrying a godly and God-fearing person is the surest way to happily ever after. If this is the sort of stories you like, subscribe to my channel so you can get a notification whenever I upload a new video. Let's get right down to it.
I don't know what to do and I need your advice. Anything you say might help me because I'm going insane. So, this is my story and my dilemma. We have been married for 2 years but have known each other for 3. We have an adorable daughter together. We had a nice home, nice cars, great family and friends. I loved her dearly, and although we had our problems, it was just as normal as other people. We met 3 years ago and became great friends. She became pregnant a year after we met, and since we didn't want to have our baby outside wedlock, we got married. After the birth of our daughter, my wife decided not to go back to work, and so I became the sole breadwinner. This was a joint decision, and since I was earning a good salary, I thought it would be good for her to raise her and assume the role of a homemaker. However, I started noticing that she was paying less attention to me and there was a lack of intimacy between us. I attributed it to tiredness and all that came from nursing a young child. However, as time went by I started to notice little changes. We would go out and men would tell her she was pretty and had a great body. I was happy that I did a great job of taking care of my wife, that others openly praised her. My wife became flirty with men. I complained about it, but she said she had eyes for only me and there wasn't much to it. Well, I trusted my wife. I wasn't bothered by her behavior so much after that until the day my nosy neighbor invited me to his house and advised I keep an eye on my wife. I asked him what he meant, but he didn't give any further comment on it. I sensed he was concerned about my family, but what the problem was what he didn't tell me. At first I thought that was rude, but since there's always no smoke without fire, I was determined to unravel the mystery. I thanked my neighbor and left after a few minutes of awkwardness. I never confronted my wife about it. I just kept my cool and hatched out a plan. My neighbor's words always rang in my ears. After the first birthday of my daughter, I told her business was taking me out of the state and would be gone for 2 weeks. She said she would miss me and bored at home without me. She was all lovey-dovey all of a sudden. There was a nagging feeling that she was happy I would be gone, and at the back of my head. By the time I returned from work that day, she had packed my suitcase for me, but the trip was for 2 days later. I became even more curious. Definitely something is not right. I didn't go out of town. I just hanged around in the neighborhood. What I saw blew my mind. It's even too heavy for my mouth to say. I saw at least different men in and out of my house the first day. The second day were not different. But on the third day, a lady visited with a girl of about 8 years old and stayed the night. I couldn't bear it any longer and crept upon her in the early hours of the 5th day. I had my spare keys and entered without any noise. There was a guy in my bed with my wife. I saw bottles of wine everywhere, and they were both deeply asleep. At this time, I didn't care about her anymore and would be surprised if I didn't see any man that morning. I picked her phone and left the room. I went to the visitor's toilet and started scrolling through. It was like all hell was let loose on me that day. My wife had social media accounts where she introduced herself as a commercial sex worker with class. The bottom nearly fell out of me. I looked at the dates the accounts were created, a few of them dated as far back as 7 years. What? Who have I been living it? I was angry. The texts were very intimate in nature, with many indications that she had patronized by many men. When my wife woke up from her slumber party, she looked for her phone but it gone. When she couldn't find it anywhere, she accused her client of stealing her phone. When he couldn't produce it, she called the cops on him after a thorough search of the house. When the cops arrived at my house and everyone was in the living room, she was yelling on top of her voice how the man had stolen her phone and all that. I came out of the toilet visibly angry, but I tried to conceal my anger. Then I smiled. I introduced myself to the cops and handed my wife her phone. My wife cowered in a corner. She couldn't utter a word. Things became even scarier when that young girl came running into the living room with my daughter and yelled, "Mom! My sister is awake." I looked at her with mouth agape at the uncanny resemblance between her and my wife. "Mom. Did she say, Mom?" I asked the girl who she was. She said my wife was her mother and she'd been living with her mom's friend. Anyway, the man apologized profusely and said he didn't know she was married. The cops left, the man also left, and I was led in a world of confusion. Then another bombshell dropped that night. The little 8-year-old girl was indeed her daughter. When she began to tell me her story, I wept uncontrollably. Not from empathy for what she went through as a child, but for myself. For being so foolish, too trusting in marrying her without any thorough investigation. That was the biggest mistake of my life and will regret this forever. I let him leave peacefully and went to my neighbor's house to cool. He welcomed me with his wife into his house once again. I found out later my wife had removed the surveillance cameras everywhere inside and outside our building. Fortunately, I had video footage of all the men I saw going in and out of the home. My neighbors advised me to keep my anger under check and handle everything maturedly. I went back home a few hours. My wife was a complete wreck when I returned home. She had cried herself to stupor. I noticed she had a picture with her. Her hair was disheveled and she looked pathetic. She begged and pleaded, but I wasn't moved a tiny bit. I sat her down and told her I needed every detail of her life from before 7 years ago. I let her know I was with her phone for over 3 hours and I went through every phone application, social media account and emails. She put the picture on the table and said,
"That is my mother."
That was news to me because she told me she was an orphan and she grew up in a foster home. I can't believe she even lied about this too. Oh my goodness.
She isn't dead like I made you believe. No, she is alive, but this thing here isn't my mother. My dad died and she got married to another man. I think his name is Edwin. I don't even care what his name is. I didn't have any problem with her second marriage. I was so young and naive then. Every night this man came into my room to harass me. He touched and did silly things with me. At first I wouldn't say anything because he drank a lot. Then one day, I felt since I have a mother, let me pour out my heart to my mom. I did, but she said there was nothing she could do about it. I was sleeping in my room another day around 1 o'clock in the night when I felt someone touching me. I was 17 then. I started screaming, but my mother didn't show up. I kept screaming and screaming and screaming. My mom didn't even come to my room to ask me what the problem was. She let the beast take advantage of me. I got pregnant and I told my mother. She told me was to get rid of my baby. She kept making mistakes after mistakes. I think she was more interested in the gold and jewelry she got from the man. I ran away home and started sleeping under the bridge because there was nowhere to go. And for good 7 years she didn't see me and she didn't look for me. My mother said her husband was her only source of survival, so she turned deaf ears to my pain and woe in the hands of that devilish man. After using me and messing me up, he left my mom. She didn't know where he was. She had nothing, absolutely nothing. After he dumped her, she reached out to me, but by that time I was living a chaotic and riotous life. She came too late. She came looking for me because according to her, she had nothing left. She said if I didn't take her back, no one would take care of her at her old age. I couldn't deal with her because she'd always been a gold digger, and I knew she came back because she thought I had money. She loved the money, gold and traveling, and I felt she used me to get those from her husband. I asked her to be sincere with me if I was adopted, because it was, and it's still incomprehensible that she is my mother. I slept under the bridge for 4 years until I was 25. When I had my baby, it was through a C-section and the baby died. Anyways, I started begging to eat. I slept with thugs under the bridge for survival. I found out he infected me with STD. I don't know how I was cured, but I spent an awful lot of money. I also advised her to go for medical checkup. My mother used me, broke me, and abandoned me. I can never forgive her for that. After I lost my baby, I didn't know where to start from. One of the girls that lived under the bridge with me was the one who helped me pay the hospital bill, and she said I must pay her back. In fact, I signed an agreement before she helped pay the bill. I got admission to the university, but I had no money. And then the big question was how to pay back the money my friend lent me. She kept asking why I hadn't given her the money, but I didn't have any source of income. I asked her to show me the road to the business she was engaged in because she was doing well. She lived in a hotel and paid her rent on time. She dressed well, ate well, and was well put together. She told me it wasn't anything I would be interested in. I promised her that, as far as it would pay my bills and help me pay back her loan, I was ready to do anything. Finally, she promised to tell me on one condition, and that was I had to agree to do the business with her, and there was no reneging on my promise. I signed another agreement with her. That assured her I wasn't joking. She told me she was a commercial sex worker. I shouted and told her that would be over my dead body. How would you force me into signing such agreement when you knew I wouldn't even dare? I told her I couldn't, wouldn't, and shouldn't trade my body for anything in this world. I had been through a lot already. She knew I was serious, and from that moment I told her she pressurized and pestered me for her money each time she saw me. When I couldn't deal with her anymore, I went back to her and asked her to introduce me to the business. I did it for 5 years. So my friend gave me the money to rent a room for myself, and I started my selling business. This business is morally degrading, but I was able to pay back the hospital bill and my rent. I started making money and I don't have to work anywhere else. I have a social media account where I advertise my business and I enjoy good patronage. The unfortunate thing is that armed robbers come in from time to time, raid the hotel, and steal from us. In most cases, they force us to perform whatever act they wanted, and well, what can we do other than to comply if we still want to have our heads on our necks? Some customers don't pay, police come and ask us for papers and whatever, and if you can't pay your way out they assault you in a gang. I made up my mind to have a child. At least someone I could call my own, and I became pregnant. To this day, I don't know who her father is. But before she was old enough to know what I did for a living, I packed out of the hotel, the place I called home for 5 years, and rented an apartment. Well, life outside was different from my profession within the hotel. I asked a friend to look after my daughter for me, and I left the town. Many people knew the kind of services I provided for men. One of my clients got the job at the airport for me. That made it easy for me to transition quickly, but I was found time to make quick money from men inside and outside the airport. Your friend who introduced me to you didn't know I was that sort of person. I fell in love with you the first time I met you because you were like the father I didn't have. You were funny, hardworking, and rich. I thought my life was complete and all. But after we got married, I began to realize you couldn't match my energy. You were 45. I wanted to party, I wanted to have fun, I wanted to be with someone my age, I wanted to explore the world around me. You know, I was confined to the hotel for a long time. Being married to you isn't freedom, and I'm sorry, I can't promise you we will grow old together because it's obvious we can't. You are almost 3 decades older than me. I don't love you. I never did.
Katie's words hit me like hammer. She didn't hold anything back. She just went boom boom boom. I know older men prefer young girls, but I'm sorry, it's not going to work between us. The look in her eyes during her speech showed me she was a lost cause. I teared up when she said, she never loved me. It was more for my own foolishness and stupidity for betraying Lizzie. We separated, and she began openly dating other men. I immediately filed for divorce, and then she tried everything she could to get me back. She was filthy and disgusting in my eyes, so there was no way I would take her back. I later began hearing about the adultery she was committing while we were still together, but it didn't matter by then. Katie has the custody of my daughter because she's still young. I hope someday I'll be able to get full custody. I live alone now and I leak my wounds every day. Lizzie and I remain friends for the sake of our children, but she said she would never take me back, not in this world nor in the world to come.
All married couples go through tough stages in their marriage, and it's difficult getting through them. This is why counseling is important before and during marriage. Praying together, studying the Bible together, and fellowshipping together are basic ingredients for a long-lasting marriage, especially one built on Jesus Christ, who is the bedrock of every successful marriage. If God gave you a recipe for a healthy, beautiful marriage and you want to add your own sugar and salt to it, or remove any ingredient, you will end up with disaster. And then you say, "Oh God, why did you let this happen to me?" No. It's not God. It's your own decision. Be wise, brother. A genuine godly desire and passion for the things of God. Fear of God, self-control, patience, kindness, prayer, and more prayer will give you a spouse that genuinely loves you and fears God. You can't succeed in marriage outside of God. There will be storms, but your faith in God will help you through. You can't marry someone who makes decisions anyhow. Be guided. Philippians chapter 4 verse 8 says, "Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things." Whenever you think about your marriage, think about this verse. It will help you to treat your spouse and marriage better. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to my channel. Click the notification bell, like and leave your comments. Thank you for watching my video, beautiful people. Until next time, bye and God bless you.